Hello, welcome to Morality Chapter 2. Today's lesson is going to be on the first part of Chapter 2, our strategies for moral decision making. For the textbook, you're responsible for knowing the material in pages 77 through 108. So let's begin. Our objectives for this lesson are to explain what rationalizations are and why they inhibit moral decision making, and that will be classwork 2.12 on Schoology, which I'll show you in a second. And then to explain the STOP method for making moral decisions, today we're going to focus on the S, which is to search out the facts. So today we'll be focusing on what is the moral object, what is the intention, and what are the circumstances. But first, please direct yourself to Schoology so you can do the warm-up. The warm-up will be located in the orange Chapter 2 folder. Then you go to the red Classwork and Discussions folder, and you're going to do Classwork 2.12. First, you need to watch this video here, and it's going to take you to a video that's going to be from the University of Texas, from their Business Ethics Department, that's going to explain what a rationalization is and what a self-serving bias is. After you watch the video, please think of an example of a self-serving bias or rationalization and how it might affect a person's ability to make a correct moral decision. You can imagine a hypothetical or give an example from your own experience. So if we scroll down here, we can see examples from other classes. I think this one is a pretty strong one here. When you get an A on a test, you consider yourself smart. When you get an F, you blame the teacher because they don't like you. So that's a rationalization because you're not taking personal responsibility for your role in getting an F. You're rationalizing the F by blaming on the teacher. Another good example of a rationalization is when I was a kid, my parents used to take us to the movies and we'd buy one ticket but stay all day and watch 3 movies. And when I got older, I asked my mom, Mom, isn't that stealing? And her rationalization was this. She said, well, even though we didn't pay for 3 movies, we stayed all day and bought more concessions. So ultimately, we did something better than paying for all the movies. We bought more concessions, which is better for the movie theater in the end. Obviously, what we were doing was wrong, but my mom was trying to find a way to rationalize it or explain away something she knew was wrong. So now that you've finished the warm-up, let's move on to the lesson. All right. So today, again, we're focusing on steps in moral decision-making. Often when we act, we do it based on intuition or feelings and emotions, and many times our actions are not even on a conscious level. So in thinking about morality, we need some objective steps to take to help us make good decisions. And your textbook's method is called the STOP method. So S stands for search out the facts. This is what we're focusing on today, the moral object, intention, and circumstances. Then T stands for think about alternatives and consequences. O stands for others, that we need to both consult others and think of how our actions affect others. And then P is pray. It may not seem important, but tomorrow we'll talk about why this is a very important part of making good decisions. So first thing to understand is what is the moral object? The moral object is the act itself, or the end toward which the act is inherently ordered. So this is, what did I do? What is my action? What am I going to do? There are acts that we say are intrinsically evil because they are only oriented or ordered to something that's bad. So an example of something that is objectively or intrinsically evil would be murder. Another example would be rape. It's no way can that be ordered toward the good. Abortion is also an example of something that's intrinsically evil. There's no way an abortion can ever be ordered toward the good because you're taking the life of an innocent unborn person. So when we're thinking about the moral object, 2 rules that your book gives for understanding the moral object are these. Our acts must promote the good of humans. So the acts we're going to take promote the good? If they promote evil or something that's bad, then they're wrong. Another thing that's really important is they must be conform to objective moral norms. An example would be like the 10 Commandments, the Golden Rule. We can use that as an objective standard to judge whether what we're doing is right or wrong. Again, it's objective because it's not coming from within the self. It's not my personal opinion. I'm looking at what I want to do and comparing it to the 10 Commandments, which was a revealed moral norm that God gave us in the Hebrew Bible. So another thing your book asks you to do is consider that actions express who we are, they form us, and they impact others. So if you're going to be a person who's going to cheat, you're going to become a cheater. If you're going to be a person who lies, you're going to grow up into being a liar. Also, none of us lives on an island. There's no action you can do that doesn't have an impact on others, and we also always have to take that into account. So again, the first question we have to ask is, what is the moral object? What is my action? What am I going to do? So let's take a look at an example. So Molly wants to help her friend get a job. So she tells a little lie when filling out the reference form. What's the moral object? Then what's her intention? And what's the circumstance? So the moral object here, what does she do? She lies. So that's your moral object. Now the question is it wrong to lie? Yes. We know that it's objectively wrong because the 10 Commandments says that it's wrong to lie. Now, let's look at her intentions. Her intentions were to help her friend. Her intent is good, but good intentions cannot make something that's objectively wrong good. Also, her circumstance. She tells a little lie. So there's a difference between telling a big lie and a little lie, right? Even if it's just a little lie, it's still wrong. But circumstance can determine your blameworthiness. So let's look at intentions and the role they play in moral decision making. So the intentions are the why of your action or your motivation. 2 rules for how intentions play in the morality. If something's to be good, your intent must be good. And the ends or the results cannot justify the means. Means is the manner in which you're acting. So even if the result is good, if the means, the moral object, is evil, then the act is evil. So intentions are important. Think about a politician who donates money to charity. That's a good end. The result's good, but if he does it because he's trying to get bribes to stay in political office, then his action is bad because his intentions are bad. Remember that intentions reside in the will of the person acting, the subject. That should be morality. It's the subjective dimension of morality. So remember when we read Psalm 139, it talked about God knows us, even in the dark. We could try to hide from him, but he's there. Sometimes we can't know what someone's intentions are, whether they're good or bad, but the subject, the person acting, always knows deep down inside. I think it's fascinating that humans can lie to themselves about what they're doing, But at the end of the day, I know what's motivating me, and if my intentions are bad, then what I'm doing is wrong. Even the legal system recognizes the role motive plays in the level of responsibility. A first-degree murder charge, you're going to get more jail than manslaughter. First-degree murder is when you plan, premeditate, and intentionally kill someone, whereas manslaughter typically is perhaps your actions result in the death of another, but it wasn't intended. So a kid jumps in front of your car and gets killed. Was it wrong that the kid got killed? Yes, but your intent wasn't to kill him, so that mitigates your responsibility. Remember that your intention can include a series of actions to one end, or it can involve more than one intention, and that makes things a little bit tricky. So maybe my intention is to rescue Jews, but in doing so, I also have the intent to mislead the police. Again, it's wrong to lie, but the overarching intention is good. So where we wouldn't say lying is right, but in this case, again, the responsibility would be mitigated. So again, two rules to keep in mind are keep your intentions good, and remember, ends do not justify the means. Strike this, we're not doing that. So let's take a look again at another example that'll help illustrate these ideas. So Dominic is in an abusive marriage. His wife Monica degrades him in front of their children and often gets drunk and physically abuses the children. She always apologizes afterward, but makes no efforts to change. After much prayer, Dominic decides that in order to protect his children, he must start the divorce process. Now, this one was very confusing to a lot of students. First of all, what is the moral object? Some students said that this was to protect his children. No, the moral object is actually this. It's to divorce. This is the moral object. He's going to divorce his wife. So the question is that morally right or wrong? It's wrong. How do we know? Because Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew, when questioned about divorce, he says, when quoting Genesis 1, he says, Genesis 2, two become one flesh, thus man cannot separate them. But with this example, we know that divorce is wrong, but let's look at his circumstance. His intention is to protect his children. So those are good intentions. And then let's look at his circumstance. He has a drunk wife who makes no effort to change. So while the moral object, divorce, is wrong, his intentions are good, and the circumstances are beyond his control. He can't control what Monica does, and she's dangerous. So he would not be considered culpable or fully responsible for the sin of divorce. So, for example, if he were to go to his priest, I would assume the priest would say, normally divorce, especially if you remarry, is a sin. But in this case, he doesn't really have a choice. So he wouldn't be held to the same level of responsibility as what if Dominic just saw a pretty girl, he wants to hook up with her, so he divorces his wife, leaves his kids to marry some other woman out of lust. That's completely different than this situation. So again, this shows you how intention and circumstance are important. Now let's take a little look at circumstance. Circumstances are the who, when, where. The how can also refer to usually to the moral object. So what am I doing? Circumstances and consequences of an act are secondary. So just because the circumstances, just because you have a good circumstance or a circumstance that limits your choices doesn't make an evil act good, like in Dominic's case. But what it does do is it determines the level of goodness or badness of an action and the culpability. Culpability is the degree to which you're held responsible. So circumstances, who, what, when, where, how, sometimes make no difference. An example where it really wouldn't make a difference would be cheating. It doesn't matter if you cheat at home or in the classroom. It doesn't matter if you cheat by looking at another student's paper or copying it. the circumstances there don't really have much to do with the level of goodness or badness. They don't really have to do with the amount of responsibility. One case where it would make a difference is, what about the moral object of disciplining my children? I don't know if I spelled that. So my action is to discipline my children. The circumstances are key. I can discipline my children by giving them a timeout, or I could discipline my children by beating them. Obviously, whether or not I beat them or give them a timeout is going to be important. Remember, the Catechism teaches in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 754, that circumstances of themselves cannot change the moral quality of acts, but again, they could determine our level of responsibility. So circumstances are important. Let's look at an example why. So two persons see a car crash. Maria is a doctor. She considers stopping, but she's already late, so she drives on. Viet is a high school student. He would like to help, but has no first aid experience, so he says a silent prayer and continues to school. So in this case, the moral object is the same. It's more of a sin of omission than commission. They both decide not to help. So they see an accident. We should help each other when we're struggling, but they choose not to. But the circumstance is key. Who is more responsible, Viet or Maria? Maria is, because she's a doctor. Because of her circumstances and her knowledge of medicine, she has a greater moral obligation and level of responsibility to help in this case than Viet. He's just a high school student. So Maria is more culpable, meaning she has more moral obligation and responsibility to help because of the circumstance in this case. So this is a summary. It's from page 186, and you can see by these quote marks, I quoted the textbook here. Another good little test to ask yourself is to ask this question: live your life as though every act were to become a universal law. When you're trying to decide if the moral object is right or wrong, ask yourself, would I want everybody to do this? Would I want this to be a universal law? So if the moral dilemma is cheating, would you want everyone to cheat? Think about what that would mean. If everybody cheats, then maybe the airline pilot who's flying my plane cheated on his test and doesn't know really how to fly. What if a doctor or a lawyer cheats on the bar exam and she's your lawyer? You wouldn't want that because she'd probably be a bad lawyer. Use this just as kind of a little check. Now, this is the review of what we studied today. So if an action is to be morally good, it must meet all of these requirements. The act itself must be for the good of humans and according to God's law. So, for example, the Ten Commandments. Our intentions must be good, and the circumstances should be fitting. And by fitting, they mean, as in the example we just saw, it is fitting that a doctor would help at an accident scene where it isn't necessarily fitting that a high school student should. If any of these conditions is missing, the act is no longer good in every respect and is therefore morally wrong. Now, again, you may not necessarily be fully culpable for it, depending on your intentions and the circumstance, but the act is wrong. Also remember that the moral object, what we do, is the decisive factor. The moral object must always be good if we want to be morally good. Good intentions cannot justify evil means. Remember the expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. No matter how good your intentions are, if the means or the method you're using is evil, then your action is evil or wrong. Circumstances cannot make something objectively evil, like, say, abortion, into a good act, because, again, the act itself is intrinsically evil. So at the end of this lesson, students are going to get into their families and look at 2 case studies together, and they're on Schoology, so let me show you where that is. Oh dear, I don't see the browser. Hang on. Okay, so here's a browser so I could show you. So we've finished lesson 1 of chapter 2. Now let's test. Let's see how well you understood what you learned. In your families, or if you're absent, you could do this on your own. Go to the orange Chapter 2 folder. Go to the red Classwork and Discussions folder. And you're going to do this assignment here. This one right here. Classwork 2.13, 2.13. What makes something moral? Let's take a look. Okay, so for this assignment, you're going to open up this PDF, have one person in your family serve as the recorder, put everyone's names, so everybody's names at the top, and then have one person record your answers. So you're going to look at two scenarios. Scenario 1, you're going to read it as a family, then discuss. What is the object? That's the action. Remember, what is the act? What am I doing? The intention, so what is the motive? You're going to write that there. And the circumstances. Describe the who, what, when, where. I'm not supposed to say where. Then you answer these questions. Is the choice morally good or bad? Yes or no? And then the reason. Remember, when we're talking about morality, whether or not it's right or wrong, it's not, it depends. It's either right or it's wrong. But then you're going to go down here and look at this. Do any of the circumstances mitigate Jonathan's guilt? So maybe what he does is wrong, but he might have had some mitigating factors where he might not be fully responsible or held to account based on his intentions and circumstances. So you're going to do this together with your family. And then if you keep scrolling down, here's the second scenario. Complete that and then upload it to Schoology. And then we'll discuss this before we move into lesson 2. So this brings lesson 1 of chapter 2, moral decision making, to a close. Again, let's review. What did we study? We looked at the first step in the STOP method. So S-T-O-P, the S is search out the facts. And we need to find out the moral object, the intent, and the circumstances. So that's what we learned about today. Next class, we're going to look at the T, the O, and the P. And we will see you then. Thank you.